This is a secular story, this quote here, but these oceans have not always existed on our planet, arriving here many hundreds of millions of years after the Earth first took shape 4.5 billion years ago. It's a standard story. Earth cooled down from a molten state, and then it sat there, and then millions of years later, water came under the Earth to form the oceans. Say specifically where it came from, they will say this. The ocean's water arrived in frozen lumps from space during one of the most violent episodes in our planet's early history. Exactly where these comets and asteroids came from is uncertain. So
there's this huge reservoir of water somewhere out in the universe, and it's just shooting chunks at the Earth over billions of years.
According to their story, but they're not sure exactly where it came from. And then they say this, there's another source. So you got it coming from outer space, but then also they say volcanoes and other fissures in the crust allowed superheated water vapor to escape into the atmosphere. You go on to say this, and it rained and rained, possibly for millennia. If nothing else, the deluge recounted by countless myth creation stories correlates with what happened in the earliest, most tumultuous years of the Earth. So they'll talk about these mythical stories here that we have that line up with the Bible. They say, you know, don't get too excited. We're not saying there's evidence for the flood story in the Bible, but yeah, it rained and rained and rained.
Well, according to their time scale, though, I mean, these rains would have happened billions of years before there were any human beings, so that really doesn't even jive for them there, right?
It doesn't, but they want to point that out in case anyone would mistakenly think there's any correlation here at all. But the headlines recently stated this: origin of Earth's water traced back to the birth of our planet. And again, initially they were saying millions of years later. Now they're saying perhaps it was right here from the beginning. Here's a quote: fragments of Earth's earliest rock preserved unchanged deep within the mantle until they were coughed up by volcanic eruptions suggest that our planet has had water from the very beginning.
Did they show where that comes from? Do they have a theory as to where the water from the beginning came from?
Not sure why it would have been there. Their initial theories say it couldn't have been there, but now they're saying it looks like it's been here from the very beginning, which is the opposite of what they used to teach, and it came millions of years later. Well, what's interesting about that is the Bible has a commentary on that. It does chime in this particular topic. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 5 says, the earth was formed out of water and by water. Peter's saying that God created this earth out of water and by water. That would mean that water's been here from the very beginning.
So the Bible's always said that. It took science a little bit of time to catch up.
Yeah, just a little bit behind the scenes. Also, Genesis 1:1, everyone's familiar with that. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it goes on to say, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Obviously, if God's hovering over the waters in the beginning, the water's been here from the very beginning. So, surprise, the Bible actually explains what they're discovering, that it looks like water's been here from the very beginning. Then we also have, related to the Earth's oceans, the idea of the amount of water on this planet. But recent headlines, they say the Earth may have underground ocean 3 times of that on the surface. So they're saying, yeah, there's a lot of water in the oceans, but there might be 3 times as much under the surface.
Now, I've heard this too recently, and I've even seen it, and it goes against what I was taught in school as a child, that they didn't indicate any water. They indicated, you know, magma and all this other stuff, heated rock, but we never learned about water under the Earth's crust.
Sure, they were never envisioning large amounts of water there, but now it seems like there's actually evidence for that. And what they'll say is this: after decades of searching, scientists have discovered that a vast reservoir of water, enough to fill the Earth's oceans 3 times over, may be trapped hundreds of miles beneath the surface. So now they're thinking they're finding evidence of this great amount of water.
That's an enormous amount of water. 3 times the Earth's, what's on the surface now, which is 70%. So 3 times that would be just a mind-boggling amount of water, right?
It is. And when we go back to Scripture, well, that actually makes sense. Again, back to 2 Peter chapter 3, we already read that the earth was formed out of water and by water. It goes on to say this: by these waters also the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. So God created the earth out of water, and then later used those same waters to judge the world because of sin. That's a lot of water. There's a lot of water in the oceans today, but now we're finding out there's probably a lot more under the layers of the earth, which makes a lot of sense because we also read in Genesis 7:11, talking about the flood, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were open. The Bible says the great fountains of the deep burst forth. So water came from within the earth up into the atmosphere, back down for 40 days and 40 nights.
So even if a third of that water, which would be all the oceans again doubled, God let out for a time, that would be enough to cover the whole earth.